Hello. Always to all of us to see how many of you are here from all over the country. And I think probably for all of you who are watching that chat fly by, it's just, these very difficult times to see so many people still passionate, still cautious. I want to go as far to say optimistic, but still in this fight, still resilient. So it's really heartening to see all of you on this Wednesday evening. Welcome to you, whether this is your first time with the Indivisible Truth Brigade or you've been with us for, wait for it, 5 years. Yes, this has been going on since 2020. So welcome to all of you. I wanted to start with, this is the same quote we actually started with last month, but it's just so meaningful to me personally, and I think to anybody who's in this world at this time, feeling just so distressed and disheartened by what's happening. I love it. Faith is taking the first step even when you don't see the whole staircase. And that's exactly where we are right now. It's very hard to see the light at the end of this tunnel. It's very hard to see where we're going to be in, even next month, not to mention next year. But we still have to have faith that we are human beings. We share the common values. Most people share the same kinds of values, and that we will get through this as long as we're together and we don't give up. So a bit of housekeeping. We are recording this call. We will email materials and links. You probably won't see the links in the chat because the chat's going to fly by, but you will get them after this call. I want to welcome you no matter where you are in your disinformation fighting progress. If you need captions, do click on the CC in the menu bar. You probably are all really good at that by now. This is a working call for volunteers. It's not for journalists, not for reporting. If you want to report on the Truth Brigade, please contact us. We'd love to chat with you, but please, this call is not public. If you have questions, do use the word ask in all capital letters in the chat. We might not see it at and in the moment, but I do plan to stay on after the call for about 15 minutes and answer any questions that we don't get to, which is probably most questions. And of course, the golden rule in the chat, please be kind. We're all here because we all care and we care about one another. Chat is not the place to argue. And I'll say hi to Juliana. She's going to be our main person in the chat, chatting with all of you. You won't see her on the screen in the call, but we see her in the back end and are so grateful. And then, of course, expect the unexpected. Technology often messes up, and we often mess up with technology. So we appreciate your patience with any and all of that. For our agenda today, so we've already started. We're going through call business. That's me. And then Lori Saltvine is going to come on and run a poll, just a quick check-in with all of you. And then Kelsey Suter and Cameron are going to be talking about disinformation 2025 in context. Kelsey's going to be talking about what's happening immediately, and then Cameron's going to be talking about a little bit of a bigger picture. And then I'm so excited we can hear from Henry Hicks from PEN America, who's been studying both and working hard in the fields both of disinformation and in social justice for years. And I'm just so excited to hear from him. And then we'll get into the down and dirty. What are the strategies and tactics we can use to fight back? And then what is the specific campaign that we're running right now? Because the Truth Brigade is all about doing something. It's learning is important, but doing is more important. Then we'll quick talk about how to get involved, do another quick poll. And then, as I said, I'll stay on for an after call Q&A. So as you can see, it's jam-packed. So I want to start with a big thank you. As I mentioned, the Truth Brigade has been around for a long time. We have mentors who are volunteers, and they are, every week, they are reaching out to new members to ask them if they want any coaching, and this whole operation couldn't run without them. And then we have Truth Brigade ambassadors. These are people who are reporting back to their groups on what they learn on these calls. And see how many people they are? Each person represents a group. So exciting to see how the word is getting out just to literally thousands of people. All right, so before we jump into anything else, I want to state a reminder. We are right in the middle of Black History Month, and I can't think of a more important issue than to talk about disinformation used to justify oppression in the Black community. So what you're going to see is a slide full of examples. And you'll know what I'm talking about once I start showing you. So starting in 1619, people were lying about Black people's acuity to justify slavery, segregation, and exclusion from education. Separate but equal were some key policies. 1700s to the present, people were lying about pain sensitivity. That's what underlied the horrible Tuskegee syphilis study and other experiments. 1865, people started lying about criminality. When I say people, I mean powerful people. And they used that to justify mass incarceration and police brutality, still going on today. And then 1870s, lies about Black family ties to justify redlining and the dismantling of social safety nets. All of this is still going on. 1900s, lies about athletic and musical abilities, justifying limited economic opportunities. And then now, we know what's happening now, lying about the peaceful nature of the Black Lives Matter movement to undermine racial justice. So I'm just going to leave this slide up for a moment. We can all sit with it. And when we think about fighting disinformation, this colors all of our tactics and strategies, because disinformation targets marginalized communities. And if you take nothing else away from that, this is the thing to keep in mind. So it's a lot. Now, it's kind of hard to transition from this, but we're going to move on to a poll. And Laurie will run that.
Okay, thanks, Jody. And I noticed someone asked about sound. I hear you just fine, and I hope everybody else can hear me fine. I think, yes, other people are saying it's fine and sound is good. Okay, so if you are having trouble with your sound, check your computer, maybe leave the call and then come back. That might fix the problem. Okay, so let me launch the poll here. Hold on one sec. All right, we've got 5 questions here for you. And notice that the last question is kind of a fill in the blank if you would like to. But if you can answer questions 1 through 4, that would be great. Let's see if the 1,050 people that are here, if we can get, most of you to check in here. It'd be great to see and compare in a minute your answers. So I will be quiet to give you a chance to think about your answers too. Let's give you about 20 more seconds. Okay, we're at about 20% participation. Would love to get to 50%, so we have a good sampling here to help us understand more about your Truth Brigade work. We're at 40% almost. And like I said, I'm going to give you maybe 5 more seconds. We're at 50%. That's awesome. Let me give the countdown. 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. And I'm sorry if you're in the middle of answering, but let's see our results and just kind of observe them for a minute before we go on. So how did people learn about this webinar? Most people look like learned about it from the Indivisible email that they got. How recently have you heard, seen some kind of lie? A lot of people saw stuff today. We've been seeing it, the past week and even into the past month and year for sure. But today seems to be the winner, unfortunately. Have you seen, heard misinformation in the following places? Looks like all places definitely have that kind of information, but social media edging out here as the most, but not to disqualify anything else, unfortunately. And then it's great to see that we've had a few people have some persuasive conversations using their Truth Brigade tactics over the past month or so. We hope that next time when we do this poll, we can maybe double those results. That would be great. So I'm going to stop sharing, and I think I'm turning it back to one of my colleagues.
Yes, and apologies to anybody who can't see the results. I'm not sure what happened there, but and thank you to Laurie for talking us through what people were saying. So now Cameron is going to be chatting with you. Oh, I'm sorry. Now Kelsey Suter is going to be talking with us from video about what we're seeing this week. Kelsey is a Truth Brigade advisor. She's been with us from the beginning. She is external to Indivisible, because it's so important for the Truth Brigade to make sure that everything that we're saying is completely objective and completely researched. Kelsey lives in the disinformation world, and researching disinformation is her full-time job. So here's Kelsey. You'll see her twice. Oh, it's a little soft at first, but it will get louder.
Hi, good evening, everyone. I'm so excited to be back with the Truth Brigade for my first call of the year, not your all's, but I am thrilled to be here tonight. And I'm going to kick us off with these slides that I often show, looking at the sort of disinformation headlines of the week that we have been paying attention to. So here we go. There is plenty to talk about here. I'm just going to highlight a few key things. So first of all, many of us have been watching in, I will say, astonishment at the list of executive orders that have been coming out of the White House since Inauguration Day. Every week we are seeing more and more of these, and all of them seem focused on causing harm to some specific community. So we're seeing EOs targeting immigrants, federal workers, trans people in general. This past week, trans athletes in particular, trans women athletes, were all sort of subject to these harmful executive orders. So while executive orders are actions, they are policy, they are not necessarily disinformation themselves, the communications around them are loaded with these false and hateful claims about those groups of people. These executive orders are all being framed as helping American workers and families, and all of this language around them is masking the real intent and harm that is happening here. Similarly, we've been seeing Elon Musk and Doge start to dismantle some of these federal agencies focused on USAID, the Department of Education, the CIA, and others. And we're really seeing the far-right online network is like trying to prop up this work with these wild and false conspiracies about the work that those agencies do. They're making claims that these agencies are responsible for all kinds of these atrocious acts with absolutely no evidence, purely to promote government distrust and to help Musk take apart our institutions and dismantle our checks and balances. And then finally, we continue to see an active conversation about new tariffs that are being imposed on other countries. The White House is framing these as a tax on other countries. This is a pretty blatant miscommunication about what a tariff is. This hides the fact that nearly all economists agree that US consumers are going to actually pay for these taxes. This is going to cause prices to rise on many consumer goods in the United States. And of course, that is not at all matching the rhetoric that is, coming out of the White House around these. So those are the big ones. There's a lot more still happening, and it can feel really heavy out there. So I'm excited to be on this call with you all joining virtually to talk about what we can do.
All right, so that was Kelsey. And we're going to talk a little bit more about what's happening in this ugly world of disinformation. I should not only, this contact warning is somewhat tongue-in-cheek, but I just want to mention that this call, if you weren't here for the agenda, we are getting to positive things, and we are getting to tactics and strategies that you can use to fight back. So I'm going to hand it over to my wonderful colleague, Cameron, to talk us through more of what we're seeing in 2025.
Yeah, so thanks so much, Jody. And also Kelsey for that helpful framing of what we're seeing. So if you want to hop through a couple of these for me, Jody. So we are living in a new age, and that is the age of disinformation in 2025. And so what that means is that we are seeing false claims that justify cruel, illegal actions, which have already harmed thousands of people. We're seeing our platforms across the board being deregulated. Next, we're seeing government websites that are removing factual information. Think the White House's own website. We're seeing mainstream media normalize the lies. You all reported this earlier on the poll when you had national television being number 2 source of disinformation. Next. I'm not sure. And so while we are in this new era of disinformation, the age of disinformation, if you will, and it seems like there's so much of this overwhelming amount of disinformation and misinformation being thrown at us every single day, it's important to take a step back and to recognize that it's still the same bag of tricks that these disinformers, that these bad actors are following and utilizing. And so you're going to see a lot of the same information coming out of all of these different places, but oftentimes it's going to be recycled. It's going to be very, very similar to what you see somewhere else. Next slide, please. And so it's also helpful for us as we kind of take this step back to recognize that while we're in this new era of disinformation, yet it's still the same tactics, it's also the same disinformation playbook, which is a really, really bad thing. And so the first part of this playbook is, to be frank, that disinformers, they don't care about the issues. They don't care about immigration, they don't care about climate change, and they don't care about crime. And they have one goal, and that goal is to always gain profit and power over all of us. So you might be asking, well, how? How are they doing this? They're doing this by building a demand for their leadership in order to solve the fake problems that they're inventing. Case in point, Doge. That is that is one of the best examples that I can give you right now. Next, please. So I also want to remind you all that disinformation, it's designed to hurt people. It is a bully, and it does two things. First, it targets two vulnerable and marginalized groups. And this is something that we are going to see in amounts like we have never seen before. But it is also about marginalized and vulnerable groups. So when disinformation is being targeted to these groups, it's in order to create a sense of impotence, meaning that they have no power to change the system. It's also designed to undermine their trust in our public institutions, while at the same time increasing silos. Or if you really want to think about another way of silos, think about it as like a dome, someplace that they're just all in a one space. Now, when the disinformation is about these marginalized and vulnerable groups, it's designed to dehumanize people and to make discrimination okay. It's also designed to divert blame for societal problems, as well as to exploit human tribalism. Next slide. So we have some disinformation 101 definitions for you. And these are really important to remember because we talk about all of these a lot here at the Truth Brigade. First up is disinformation itself. This is information that is false and deliberately shared for that personal or political gain or to harm communities. Comparing that to misinformation, which is information that is still false, but is not deliberately shared specifically to cause harm or gain power. And then something that we are talking a lot more about these days is malinformation. And this is information that utilizes real factual data that has been distorted or even simply made public in order to do harm to communities while gaining political power over others. And so we, in particular with malinformation, we are anticipating to see a large influx of that this year in particular. Next slide. And I'm going to pass it back to Jody to introduce our amazing guest speaker.
Yay. Thank you, Cameron. And I think that, just to reiterate a couple of main takeaways from what Cameron was saying. One is that these bad actors who are spreading disinformation, it's just a few hundred groups. And that's really important to keep in mind. Most people are not deliberately lying to you and harming you. It's some really powerful people with some really powerful platforms, but it's not all of humanity. I think that's really the main thing that I wanted to emphasize. And now I'm so excited, as I said, to hear from Henry Hicks, who has been working in this disinformation world and in social and racial justice for a long time, and is here to chat with us a bit about his experiences and thoughts. So with that, I'm going to stop sharing the screen so that you can see Henry and hear from him. Hi, Henry. Now I can see you.
Hi.
Welcome.
Yes, thank you. Thank you so much for having me. I just want to say I love the Black History slide. I thought it was so important to what we're doing here. So, as Jody mentioned, my name is Henry Hicks. I use he, him pronouns, and I work at PEN America on our disinformation and community engagement team. I'm calling in from DC, where we've got a ton of snow, so I'm sorry if you can hear my radiator running in the back. Um, that said, at PEN America, we are a nonpartisan nonprofit organization that does work at the intersection of literature and human rights to advance free expression. We work with writers and their allies across the country and around the globe. But what brings us to disinformation is we believe very strongly that in order for us to have a culture of free expression, we have to have a foundation of facts and truth for that to stand on. So, it has been a difficult couple of weeks. I know I am feeling a little dizzy. I don't know about you all. I'll say that at Penn, we have been, carefully watching and responding to the flurry of executive orders that have been released by this new administration. The most relevant one for this group being probably their day one executive order, which targets efforts like this to combat disinformation under the guise of protecting free speech. Yesterday, we responded to an instance of a reporter with the AP being barred from an event, the White House. So I know that many of you have also been watching as these different orders have come in, and in particular as they've been targeting communities of color, queer and trans people, immigrants, and so many other vulnerable communities. And what we know from all of this, and what we've known from our work, is that the spread of disinformation underpins so many of the issues that are unraveling in front of us right now. Right, so there's a reason why that executive order targeting counter disinfo work was day one, right? Because all of this that we've been seeing kind of builds on top of our ability to share and engage in a robust exchange of information, accurate information. So the work that we're doing right now cannot be more urgent. And when we say that we're here doing work to fight for truth, standing on a foundation of truth, we need to be really clear about what that means. As many people on this call have said before, there's disinformation being spread about immigrants, about what's in our books, about trans people, about values such as inclusion and diversity. And so when we say that we're fighting for truth, it means more than just pushing for social media platform accountability or support for newsrooms or addressing how bad actors might use generative AI, although those are all important parts of this work. But it means centering principles of racial justice and of trans justice, of immigrant rights. Anti-racist work, for example, is counter-disinformation work. And so our counter-disinformation work must be done consciously and intentionally as anti-racist work. So I was in Texas a couple months ago as a part of one track of our programming that we've been doing at Penn, where I was sitting in a Black bookstore, talking with community leaders, organizers, but also just kind of community members as well about the disinformation that we'd been seeing in the news around the election at that point. And the thing that came up immediately was Springfield and Haitian immigrants, right? The conversation started there, but certainly did not stay there for very long because we very quickly landed on, how each of us were feeling and the concerns that we had about disinformation narratives like that feeding into a culture of anti-Black racism. So as we've seen for the last couple of weeks, all of these different targeted executive orders or actions, what we know is that all this is connected. Disinformation about marginalized communities can often contribute to an environment of prejudice, discrimination, and violence. None of these issues stand on their own, and especially not disinformation. So what does that mean for us as we're, joined here a couple, a little over 1,000 people strong who are committed to this fight? What does this mean for us? It means meeting people where they are and drawing the connection between the issues that they care about in this one. We're a couple, not even a month in necessarily to this new administration, and there's going to be a lot of organizing in the years to come. We're already seeing so much of that beginning now. But there's nothing more important than doing that work alongside each other, reaching across issues to combat disinformation. As we know, the threat of disinformation is not broad or abstract. It's intimate, and that intimacy can be a big part of how we fight back. we can bring this conversation to our dinner tables, to our barbershops, to our book clubs, to the spaces that best represent community to each of us. Because this fight is going to take all of us, and I really do mean all of us. It's going to take more than those of us on this call today or people that can tell you the difference between mis and disinformation right now. Building power, especially when it comes to this issue, means building bridges with the organizations, groups, organizers that are already tapped into our communities, into theirs. In particular, those organizations and organizers that are doing work to protect and defend the most vulnerable of us. That has to be our guiding principle. That also means that we have to reach and engage those who may be the most unlikely. So I am talking about your family and your friends, your relatives that you maybe don't get along with all the time, who may be vulnerable to receiving disinformation and who might actively spread it on social media or in person. Doing this work relationally is so critical. We may not have enough power yet in shaping the conditions that surround our communities, but we do have a unique power in shaping how our communities respond. That's a kind of power that can't be taken away from us. And we know this, y'all. I mean, our movements have always done this kind of work. Change in this country has always begun at the grassroots and worked its way up to school board meetings, up to state houses, and yes, to the halls of power in Washington. And so the good news is that we're primed for this work. We've had practice. At Penn, I've spent the last year and a half crisscrossing the country, working alongside grassroots leaders in some Belt states to train up trusted messengers. So exactly what I was saying earlier, reaching teachers, union members, seniors, students, kind of anybody and everybody, and asking that they step into this work in a way that makes sense for them. Asking to have conversations with people that they know about how they can protect themselves against this issue. Trust in institutions and in journalism may be declining, but our trust in one another is one thing that does remain resilient. Our commitment to one another, especially to those most vulnerable among us, is our strength. So that said, these are big problems. I'm not gonna, sugarcoat it or pretend like this is easy. Words like disinformation and autocracy and oligarchs are big and they mean big things. But so are words like community and democracy and movements. And so, movements are big things, but let's remember that, a movement is made up of a million little fights that each one of us takes on in our own way in our own communities. So, it doesn't have to be this big, overwhelming thing at all. There are 1,150 people on this call right now. So that's over 1,000 allies who are not only committed to this fight in their own communities, but who are also in this fight alongside you as you do this work in your own community. It's been hard. We feel these blows over the last couple of weeks. So, take a beat, get your rest in, check in on each other. But, it is so important that you make sure that you get back up. Take this energy from the call tonight, steer it towards a little fight tomorrow. The hardest part of so much of this can be just having that first conversation. So I appreciate the time to chat with you all a little bit, give you my spiel. I might throw a couple links in the chat, or I just saw some links get thrown in the chat around the work that we're doing. We're going to be releasing a report in a couple of weeks that kind of summarizes all of the work that we've done in community over the last year and a half. And so, be on the lookout for that.
Henry, thank you so much. I don't know, I can see all the hearts and claps and thumbs up. I don't know if you can see them while you're talking, but I feel so moved and inspired by what you said. I wish I could listen to you for a long time. So, here they come. Yeah. Anyway, thank you. Thank you. Thank you. I'm going to share my screen again and we'll kind of move on with the rest of the presentation. But again, everybody do make sure to go to the PEN America's website, check out Henry's resources, and let's just all, virtually share a lot of love and gratitude to Henry for all the work that he's doing and the whole organization is doing. So back to screens. I'm going to share right now. I also love that Henry spoke to us without screens. I can't. I always forget what I'm going to say next. But now I am going to be talking next because I'm really curious to involve you, all the people who are here in the chat and listening to the call. My biggest questions that people often ask is, well, why do people believe these things? And What do you think? You just pop in the chat some of the reasons that you think that people, I don't know, you might think, are they gullible? What are some of the reasons that this disinformation we're talking about is so impactful and sticky? See, scared, willful ignorance, brainwash. Look at all these things. They want to. This is really interesting. I see a few confirmation biases. I see some really interesting replies here, kind of from all over the map. Thank you so much for writing down. I'll share with you what we think from the research that we've done and our allies have done. The first thing is, as some of you pointed out, watching Fox News and all that, is confirmation bias. And what confirmation bias means is that we're predisposed, based on who we are and our upbringings, to believe certain things. And when something comes in that doesn't mesh with what we already believe, we just dismiss it. And when I say we, I do mean we, I mean all of us. Disinformation impacts all of us. We're all susceptible to it. And so it's really something important to keep in mind. If there's, say, a political candidate that you believe in, and that candidate does something that you really disagree with, I think you probably can remember what happens in your brain, how that thing, that one little blip kind of goes to the side and you dismiss it. And that happens for a long time before we can then finally let those blips build up to change our minds. So another reason is a lack of reflection. It's who has time to stop and think? A lot of times people just listen to something and then just believe it and move on. There's another thing that's called heuristics. I love saying that because I feel smart saying that word, but basically it means something that I actually found surprising. It's that our brains perceive as true the things that we remember. Like, I knew that repetition helped in memory. I knew that if we saw something enough and in the right context that we'd remember it. But what I was really surprised to learn was that we don't just remember it, but we perceive it as true. So rhymes, slogans, especially images, the things that stick with us also tend to be perceived as true in the long run. That's why we have to be also really careful about not repeating the language of the liars, because that increases the repetition and increases the feelings that they're true. Also, disinformation is intentionally designed to engage our caveman brain, and that perhaps is the most important. You'll see that most of the lies you see create outrage. They're done that way purposefully, because what happens is, for all of us, when we are stressed, we don't think straight. And that's the goal. The goal is that emotions block critical thought. People who think critically are people who can assess things and then come together to fight back. This is human. It's important to emphasize that, because we know that, yes, there are some neurological differences between people who lean left or right, but we do have more in common with each other than are different, which is really hard to hold on to. I've seen in the chat a lot of your experiences with your families and your neighbors that are just, really difficult to deal with. But underneath it all, we do have things in common. And when we remember that, it will help us fight disinformation, because you can't fight disinformation in an argument. You can't fight disinformation if somebody that you're talking with feels attacked. And also, it's not just disinformation that prompts actions. It's not just misunderstanding things. Sometimes people have their own reasons based on their own set of values. This is really cool, I think. So most people don't want to spread this misinformation. This is not just, this is from studies that show up to 85% of the lies we see are from misinformation, not disinformation. Most people share the pursuit of truth as a common value. The reason that I like to emphasize this is it gives me hope, and that's what we need. It gives me hope that we can fight back and that we can open minds. So some strategies to counter disinformation based on everything we've seen. Here's what works based on a lot of studies. 1, peer-to-peer persuasion. What that means is each of us on this call has power. With all of the things that are happening that are making everybody mistrust government, mistrust media. It's individuals who are often the most trusted messengers for truth. And fortunately, we are also, in terms of whether or not people mistrusted the rest of the world, peer-to-peer persuasion is still one of the most powerful ways of persuasion. Education. What we found out is that simply educating people by providing just a few tips on how to recognize disinformation reduces the likelihood of sharing that inadvertently. It actually has a name. It's called accuracy inoculation. So when we share tips about, have you checked the source, or does this video have a credit? Simple things like that actually make people pause and does reduce the spreading of disinformation. Tactical non-engagement. What this means is online. If you engage with disinformation posts in any way, in most cases, it increases the visibility of the post. Don't do it. It's so hard not to comment. It's so hard not to click. It's so hard not to argue. And yet we need that discipline, because when we engage with disinformation, algorithmically, it makes that piece seen more. And so we have to kind of hold back. Here's an even tougher one. Factual arguments entrench opposition. So facts and stats in person or online usually makes people more fixed in their views. And to think about that, just think of yourself. Think about someone who comes up to you and just says, you're wrong, and here's why. I don't know about you, but for me, that just makes me stand up straight, stiffen my back, and stiffen my resolve not to listen. So as much as we want to share what we know to be true, if you just come at someone hard and say, these are the facts, it's going to backfire. As a matter of fact, if you have a mindset, if only they had the facts, they'd feel differently, that's actually not productive. And that's because it can increase the resentment. We're all seeing that there's a divided society out there with half of the world resenting the other half. And what we want to do least is increase resentment. So if we don't want to have an us versus them society. And so as hard as it is, we have to kind of work internally to kind of shift that mindset. So what does work is agreement and accuracy inoculation. So when we're sending out our messages and when we're talking with people, the first thing we do is open minds through finding common values and empathy. I know that's so hard, but I can tell you that it works. It's worked for me with my neighbors, my next door neighbor, who's a staunch supporter of what's going of Trump, etc. We were having a conversation and I thought of something that I agreed with him on, which wasn't so easy. But when I said it, I saw his whole body relax and everything changed. And I was able to actually then move into some source checking questions to promote his independent thinking and critical thinking. So it's the combination of these two things where you first have someone, put their defenses down through actually finding something in common, and then gently ask questions that make them stop and think. We're looking at this for the long view. We're not going to be able to do something in an instant, but I found this successful at the beauty parlor, in the grocery store, at the soccer field, and again, with my next door neighbor. And for the years of the Truth Brigade, we get report after report of people being shocked at the successful beginnings of conversations that they have. So that leads us into our Truth Brigade tactics and channels. And Cameron is going to take us through what we're doing.
Sorry, my computer didn't want to come off mute, everybody. Tech problems. All right, so let's take a look at the Truth Brigade system. So the way that we work with our program and our members is as follows. Number one, our advisors, people like the amazing Kelsey Suter, who you all heard from earlier, they focus on studying the disinformation so you don't have to. And then they identify the most damaging and oftentimes sticky pieces of disinformation. Then our team writes evidence-based, persuasive messages for you to personalize and then share within your networks. And then, excuse me, those messages, we share them each month via our webinars, which are the second Wednesday of each month. That's where you are right now at 6:30 Eastern. And then each Friday in our Truth Brigade update emails, and then on Slack every single day, because we have a fantastic Slack space for all of our members, and then also on Facebook. And then, of course, you share your version of the message that we helped to craft online. And then offline, you engage in productive conversations within your own personal networks, but also in other places, like in letters to the editor. And then all of us, we practice non-engagement and amplification strategies in order to short circuit the disinformation cycle. And then, of course, rinse and repeat, because this work is always ongoing, every day, every week, every month. And then what we do is we work in order to cut through all of the chaos. We have to make sure that we are getting loud. And then to do that, to amplify that volume, we have to form teams and provide more pre-written messages and amplification opportunities to uplift good information, to uplift the truth. Next slide, please. So to do that, here are the platforms that we currently are operating on with the Indivisible Truth Brigade. We are on Blue Sky, we're on Instagram, we're utilizing video formats, we're on Reddit, we're doing long form, so thinking letters to the editor, and we're also doing it in personalized conversations. One of my favorite examples is when you run into a neighbor at the grocery store and they're spreading a form of misinformation, to have a great conversation with that neighbor there while you wait in line at the grocery store. But then to help further that this year, we are working on building some really stellar teams with some of our most dedicated Truth Brigade members. And we are having teams that will focus on social media, on other outside platforms like Reddit, but also we're going to have a team that focuses on doing that long form style of writing. And then, of course, we're going to have a team that works on crafting messages that are useful in conversation face to face every day. And I'll be frank with you all. It doesn't take a whole village to do this, but the reality is that together it all adds up to so much influence. We have over 9,000 members. Over 1,100 of you are here tonight, right now, which is incredible. We have had over 600 million online impressions, and we have had more than 2,000 offline conversations last year alone, which is just absolutely astronomical and incredible. And I believe I'm passing it back over to Jody now, yes?
I think so. This is our current campaign. I do want to just take a moment and clarify that what Cameron was talking about were the plans that we have for 2025. I see a lot of talk in the chat asking about where we are on Blue Sky and saying, well, I'm not on Instagram. The reason that we're focusing on certain key platforms is because the information environment out there is so overwhelming. So we're taking a few steps to clarify that. It's not to say that you can't participate on other platforms, but these are the 6 areas that we're going to be concentrating our recommendations in, and that's because these are the places where we feel we have the most influence. The teams haven't formed yet. We're going to ask you to sign up at the end of the call. Our Blue Sky presence is still in the works. We're really excited about moving forward on Reddit because we have a great opportunity to make a big difference there. And finally, we'd have a great opportunity together to amplify good information, because we want to do what we don't want to do on disinformation, amplify bad content. We do want to do with good information by sharing it and liking it and whatever we can do to uplift it. So with that, this is this month's campaign, and I think it will clarify any questions that you have about how we work and what examples might be. So we're going to hear from the lovely Kelsey again.
Hi, everybody. I am back in a new location. Don't mind the location change. And I am here to talk about what we're going to be doing specifically this week. So let me talk you through it. We have a new campaign and it is called Lies Don't Justify, and it is a little bit different from past campaigns. So we're going to talk you through all of this, but this is one of these big picture topics. So we're going to have an initial big picture message, and then we're also going to have these focused thematic messages. So I'm going to go through both and how this all fits together. So first, many of you here are familiar with this truth sandwich model, which is how we push back on lies and disinformation and propaganda using best practices. So the idea here is we are going to start and end with positive proactive messaging. We're going to do our disruption in the middle. And this is our take on how to do that. We always start with some sort of shared values, common ground. We want to suggest to people like, hey, we care about the same things. We're on the same team. Then we're going to do our disrupting in the middle by prompting critical thinking or source checking or asking, questions to get people thinking about a topic. And then we're going to pivot to our positive, proactive message, which is what we really want people to take away from this. So this is our big picture message focused on talking about the chaos that we're seeing right now coming out of the White House and these executive orders. So we're going to start with our common ground, talking about how these executive orders are leading to this very overwhelming feeling and how the flood of these EOs is outpacing the lawsuits that, are calling many of these acts illegal. Then we're going to do our disrupting, our critical thinking, questioning by asking, is this by design? Chaos creating is meant to demoralize people. It clouds opposition. And then our positive message, lies don't justify breaking the law. So that's our overarching message where we think this can be applied sort of regardless of what is happening in the headlines on this particular day. This is a way of thinking about the big picture strategy. But that's not all we're doing. We're also going to offer more focused messages and then variations for different platforms. So we're shifting tactics a little bit as the Truth Brigade. We're trying to provide, a little bit more clarity and focus and sort of force you all to do less sort of taking this and making it work. We're trying to provide you different options pre-written that might work for you. So we recognize that like each new set of lies that are going to be coming out every single day, they are meant to suppress the opposition. They are meant to, stop us from taking action against these enormously harmful and cruel policies that are coming out every day at this point. So we're creating messages and variations on those messages that you can use. You can cut and paste, or you can alter them as you want. So you're going to find a few tools to help you do that. First, you've got that core message about chaos that we just went through that is going to broadly address this feeling of overwhelm. We also have a menu of written messages that I will go through to help oppose lies about education and climate, USAID, and immigrant communities. We will also have pre-written platform-specific variations, so versions for Blue Sky and Instagram, for example. There is a graphic for each of these messages. There are resources if you want to learn more about any of these topics. In the explainer, we also have a list of trusted news sources that you can come back to learn more about any of these things. And then we will have a focus across 6 different communication channels. So you're not limited to those, but we think choosing one platform, can help to sort of focus your actions. So there's going to be a lot here, but the goal is for us to give you sort of a big menu that you can work through and customize. You can also consider joining an AMP team. This is going to let you unite with others and maximize your impact. Okay, so here are our focused messages. We have 4 of them in addition to that chaos message we already went through. You'll see that these all fit within the same theme, that same umbrella of lies don't justify. You don't need to post all 5 of these messages today or even ever. You might want to post some now or some over the course of the next couple of weeks as new things happen. But what we're trying to do here is thread this needle between calling out the specific harms as they come, but we also don't want to get stuck where we're sort of playing whack-a-mole and we're losing sight of the big picture. So we're trying to do a little bit of both and give you all options. All of these will give you sort of a framework so that you can keep coming back to this same lies don't justify framework over and over again as you need to. So in addition to those education and environment messages, we also have messages focused on the agency takeover at USAID You could easily substitute any other agency at this point, and then one focused on immigration. So again, you can take these as they are, or you can, adjust them and write your own. In the explainer, again, we will have these and then variations for different platforms if you want to use them on Instagram or Blue Sky or something else. And I think we've already been through Sosha, so you can also use Sosha to make this easier. So that's where we're at. You've got a menu of options. You've got a bunch of things to choose from. So we encourage you all to take the action that feels right for you right now. And we're excited to see what you all do.
Hey, thank you, Kelsey. I hope that
Hi, everybody.
Oh, there we go. So I hope that helped all the people in the chat who are looking for specifics. And now Lori's going to take us through a few more very practical parts of our program.
Yes, I will. Before I jump into that, though, I see a lot of questions about what's an AMP team and, where do we get these messages? So I'm going to explain that. And our AMP teams, you're going to find more about that as we work through our Truth Brigade workshops with you all. So just sit tight. There's just a lot of information here, and a lot of it will be more discoverable in the follow-up email that you get tomorrow or on Friday, probably tomorrow, but early Friday. So campaign messages are always in these message explainers. Jules dropped that link a minute ago. Maybe she can drop it again. This is a document that has these campaigns, so you can copy and paste them in the places that make sense to you. And you can personalize them. So if there's, you want to make it seem like it's more from you, or to really lift up a point, you can totally do that. And yes, we use Sosha. So Sosha is a place where all of those social media platforms can be accessed. And you can also use these conversations and these messages in your offline work too. So if you're talking to people, you're at a meeting, you're with your book group, anywhere that really makes sense, feel free to use them in that way too. And to post your truth sandwich and also personalize it a bit, like I mentioned earlier, you can use Sosha. The link is going to be in your follow-up email. It's probably in the chat right now, but you can also just use this QR code with your phone to go straight to our Sosha page and do all of that posting there that you would like. And you can find all of these campaigns and our campaigns from the past and our disinfo busters, which are actually other campaigns. So there's a lot of material there that can be used for your posting and really to lift up the things that are the most important to you when you see this kind of disinformation. Next slide, please. And if you haven't done this already, to receive our Friday email, so you'll always get a follow-up to these calls, but then we always send a Friday email lifting up all of this stuff again. So if you haven't done that, go ahead and use this QR code. We'll also have that link in the follow-up email, so you can do it one of either of those two ways. So here's another poll for you, and I will be more explicit to all of you about how to work with this poll. So there are 4 questions here, I believe, and you need to scroll down to answer each one of them. Now, I know that it's distracting to hear my voice while you're trying to answer this, but for new people, I want to give them a chance to hear the instructions. So again, you'll need to scroll down to get to the other questions, and then I will be quiet while we hopefully have about 50% or more of our participants take the poll.
Just to speak up, the AMP team is the same thing that Cameron was mentioning, and we showed you the slide of the various teams. So up until now in the Truth Brigade, we had volunteer mentors and ambassadors, but we didn't have organized teams to work together in various platforms to amplify each other's work in a really organized way. In 2025, we're going to be doing that. And that's what the AMP teams is all about. It's just 4 areas of work that we'll be working together, and we'll be giving you specialized guidance in order to get the word out in the most powerful and effective way. So that's what the AMP teams are.
All right, we're getting close to 50%, but I'm just going to give it another few seconds here. So,
Lori, I think we were going to leave this one open because there's a question at the end where people can actually write longer
okay, all
answers.
right.
And then
Thank
we're
you.
seeing several people who said the poll disappeared.
So the poll is still here. Maybe
Yeah.
just refresh or come back to your Zoom window and make sure that window's on the forefront of your computer.
Yeah.
I
Could
think
be
the
that
poll,
maybe with so many people filling it out, maybe Zoom has a.
Also, sometimes if you click on the three little dot button that reads more, sometimes it hides the poll option in there under polls and quizzes. So if you click on that, it should open the current poll.
I didn't know that, Cameron. That's great.
and
Yeah.
Jody, I'm getting a few comments here about the QR code not working. So we'll have to check
Okay.
on that. So just know,
Yeah.
everybody, everything we're posting here today, everything we're telling you is going to be in the follow-up email, so you'll have a chance to access it then.
Yes, and the QR code is in the campaign explainer. And just a reminder that we do also have Friday emails every Friday, and they include pretty much all of this information, but the current campaigns, what we're seeing this week, and links to all of these various really terrific resources that a team has put together, like how to have a conversation. You'll find a resource on that, how to write a letter to the editor in terms of disinformation, how to become an ambassador, which I mentioned at the beginning. These are people who report back to their groups, and we send ambassadors cheat sheets. So all you have to do is go to a call, then you get the cheat sheet, and then you can either copy and paste into your newsletter or whatever you like. And so you'll find that, I think I'm going to be saying this in the closing slides, but basically all of this, we know it's a lot of information. It can be really overwhelming. Oh, you know what? I think I'll just switch to the next slide because that's, yeah. Before I get to that, I do want to share this really beautiful quote from Václav Havel that I find, in the darkest of times, really, really helpful, especially, from the voice of people who have suffered. The truth is like a great storm that cannot be ignored. Even the most oppressive regimes cannot fully extinguish it. The human spirit is resilient, and though it may be bent, it cannot be broken. And I know probably many of you in your own life's experiences, you've battled a lot of storms prior to what's happening in the country today. And yet, look, you're here. You're still wanting to learn how to fight back, how to make a difference. And that gives me hope. And, this human nature to just soldier on. And just having so many of you here today, I think is for all of us, I don't know, very, very moving, I think is what I'll say about that. And feeling very grateful. And also to this wonderful team of people who have been helping collect all of this information. What I started to say, and I'll get to, is that, it's a lot of information, overwhelming. Next month, a month from now, we're going to have a new member orientation that's open to everybody, whether you've been with us a long time or just starting. And then relax. This is a lot in an age of a lot. If you do nothing else than read the weekly emails, you're doing something. You're shifting your own mindset. You're learning. And remember, we said that learning is a way to disrupt disinformation because all of us accidentally share disinformation. All of us accidentally click. And so even if you, within your own networks, if people just learn to stop before sharing and not argue, you've done a lot. And then if you want to do something a little more, maybe look in your calendar and schedule a Truth Brigade learning or message writing time, maybe once a week or once every couple of weeks. And just to use that time and to, increase your own knowledge and, maybe dip your toes into sending out a message or having a conversation. Volunteer mentors are here for you. In our follow-up, we'll explain how to contact them. And then, that actually was exactly on time. Wow, that's unusual for us. That's the end of the main part of our call. With great appreciation to all of you for spending an hour with us to learn about this important subject and for your commitment in the poll to action. With so many of us, we really can make a huge difference. So I just want to say a formal goodbye. I am going to stay on the call just for a bit to answer some questions because we didn't have a question answering session. So for anybody who wants to jump off now, I hope you have a wonderful evening. Take good care of yourself. Try not to, if the news is getting to you, you know, turn it off for a while, you know, watch The Traitor or something else. I think Love is Blind is back on again or something like that. But just, you know, turn off and do something that works for you. Anyway, thank you again. And I'll be quiet for a while you sign off and then answer a couple of questions. Good night, all. I'm going to end the poll now so we don't forget. All right, I'll take the first question that I see. And Jules, I can't see. Oh, you know what? Actually, I can stop sharing. That would be smart. There we go. I'll put my face back on again. So the first question that I saw was a request to explain the AMP teams again. And essentially, those are, there's a few key areas that we really want to focus on, but do it in an organized and coordinated way. And so we're asking if you're interested, let's say you happen to like social media or you're really keen on Blue Sky or, you know, it's a place that you're very comfortable. Well, by signing up, like in this poll, it's not actually signing up, it's just like telling us your area of interest. That means we can then send you a specific, you know, large scale actions that we might take together in that world. The same thing with letters to the editor. There's already some wonderful local Truth Brigade disinformation, anti-disinformation teams that they get together, like, I don't know how often, once every couple of weeks. And they write letters to their community newspapers, but they do it together and support each other. And so we're really trying to, we looked really closely over the last couple of months at the work we do and to try to figure out how do we continue to do it to involve the most amount of people, but also in the most impactful ways. You know, there's only so many of us here and we all are pulled in many different directions. So that's what these teams are all about. We're still kind of forming them and the concept is still evolving, but we've already got probably, you know, a bunch of people who already signed up for these various teams from a survey that we did. And, you know, we're just super excited about it. If you're interested in, you know, taking a leadership role in any of these areas, I'll pop my email in the chat. It's jody@indivisible.org. Do write me and let me know, because these are, you know, staff is going to be helping plan these teams and plan the actions, but a lot of it is going to come from volunteer input as well. So I hope that clarified that. Jules, do you see any other questions that seem to come up a lot that might make sense for me to answer?
One second. One of the questions is, how do I find you on Slack? And I think you've covered that before. But just a reminder for folks, join the Truth Brigade.
Yeah.
You'll get all this information, how to join and how to take action and how to fight misinformation.
Yeah.
Someone asked, how can I find an ambassador in my area?
Well, the ambassadors speak specifically to their indivisible groups. And so it's a way to strengthen both disinformation fighting and indivisible groups, because then indivisible groups sometimes form their own small Truth Brigade teams, which we love. You know, there are actually quite a few local Truth Brigade teams that focus on local issues. And so for any individual, you wouldn't be able to connect with an ambassador unless you're already in an indivisible group. I hope that's helpful.
Another question, which I think it's answered by us sending the follow-up email, is it possible you might create a linkable information page providing short inventory of recent and destructive pieces of disinformation? It's much needed. I believe that resource exists.
It's interesting, there's so much coming at us. For me, like I've spent so much time just, in prepping for this and the explainer and just, Googling it. And what I found is that like the New York Times, AP, USA Today, a lot of places do collections of disinformation. A site I really love is called Media Matters for America, and they are constantly monitoring the media and then writing articles and sponsoring studies about disinformation. I'll pop that into the chat. Wait 1 second. I think I don't have their link handy, but for America, but you can find them if you Google them. Our explainers, though, once you start looking at them, we do try to include a lot of resources and, just a lot of places that you can find information, not so much the disinformation. But anyway, I hope that helps answer the question. One other question that I saw a lot that I did want to address is who are we talking to? Are we are we trying to convince MAGA people? Are we trying to, dislodge people who are just, completely drank the Kool-Aid and are just, scary, right? I know we've all met people like that. And the answer is we're really focusing on our own networks because that's really where we have our relationships. That's where we can be most effective, peer to peer. And what happens is once we begin working within our own networks, then they talk with their people, and then they talk with their people, and they talk with their people, and it ripples out. And so that is the focus. And then expanding out from that, there may be people who, maybe believe completely differently, and yet they're still open to having a discussion of what you might have in common. We didn't get to do an example of how to find what's in common, but I can tell you here, it's much easier than you think. So what you do is if there's a bit of disinformation or there's a lie, let's say vaccines, harm children. Let's say that's the lie. But what you do is you think about, well, what do I care about that's related to that someone else might care about? Well, it's, quickly you can just jump to, well, we all want healthy kids. And I've had that conversation where I have, this was about with someone who didn't believe in masks. And it was the same kind of thing. It was like, why, when I figured out the why of that, I could say, with the mask, I think it was individual rights or something like that. And I could easily say, boy, freedom is really important to me too. I can hear that's a value that you hold. Can we talk about that a little bit? And then, and then after a bit, then you can say, I'm curious where you got that information because it's really interesting to me. And that's how you do that. We'll take maybe one more question. And boy, there's a lot. I hope that our follow-up email answers a lot of your questions. Lisa, you just said, how do you do this? And essentially in the follow-up, you just basically join the Truth Brigade and you'll gradually kind of get familiar with all the resources and actions that we take. Jules, is there one more question that you've seen kind of come up a lot?
I haven't seen this one a lot, but I think it's a really good question to help people. I know it's covered, the definition's been covered, but somebody wanted an example of the difference between misinformation and disinformation. So like in an actual practice.
Yeah. When it's misinformation, typically you get a sense that somebody is sharing it because it's of personal importance. And that's always what I'm looking for. You can see, like, if it's in person and someone says something like I mentioned, like vaccines harm kids. Well, it's probably in the context of a larger conversation where it matters to them as individuals, and that's why they're sharing it. Typically, it comes from individuals too. Misinformation, it's not coming from some, crazy news source. But disinformation has a lot of markers to it. You can tell usually it's very much designed to trigger emotions and anger, and often misinformation isn't. People are not spreading it because they want to make you mad. They're spreading it because it's something they think is harmful, that they believe it, but they're not trying to proselytize to other people other than to help them, because people really do share information generally to help people. And disinformation, it has these big capital letters, which you've all seen. The videos don't have good sources. Oftentimes the headlines don't match the content. If it's online or in some kind of article that you're reading, that's a kind of a dead giveaway. It's clickbait. So I think those are kind of key ways. But a big thing too is if there's somebody somewhere making huge contentions that are, really important things without listing any sources, it's just like, I know this and this is happening. That's, tends to be disinformation. In the chat, if anybody has any ideas about more how to recognize disinformation, definitely put it there. Wow, Mike thinks I'm smart. That makes me feel great. Didn't feel so smart prepping for this call. It was hard pulling it all together.
And
Yeah.
if you'd like to have more of your questions answered, you can always contact the Truth Brigade. You can join the Truth Brigade, and you can join our upcoming call in March.
Yes. So thank you all. And we're going to sign off now and say goodnight. And Jules, thank you very much. Bye-bye.